high in the mountains of what is now Armenia, deep inside a cool, dark cave, archaeologists carefully brushed away the dust of thousands of years and uncovered something astonishing. It was a shoe. A single, perfectly preserved leather shoe, shaped to fit a human foot, its laces still threaded through the eyelets, its inside stuffed with dried grass. It had been made more than 5,000 years ago, worn by a person who lived before the pyramids of Egypt were built, before the wheel had spread across the world, before writing had truly begun. And yet, there it was. A shoe, almost identical in its basic idea to something you might slip onto your own feet this very morning. What that ancient shoemaker could never have imagined was that this simple object, a covering for the foot, would go on to shape the course of human history in ways almost no one ever thinks about. That shoes would decide which armies could conquer and which would fall. That they would separate the powerful from the poor, the ruler from the servant, at a single glance. That they would spark riots, launch industries, reshape the human body itself, and one day become objects so prized that people would line up for days and pay fortunes to own them. This is the history of shoes, the story of the most overlooked object in human civilization, the thing beneath your feet that quietly carried humanity across the entire world. The story begins in the deep prehistoric past, long before that Armenian shoe was ever stitched. For most of human existence, our ancestors walked the earth barefoot, their soles growing thick and tough against the ground. But as humans spread out of the warm cradle of Africa and into colder, harsher lands, they faced a problem. Frozen ground, sharp stones, burning sand, and biting cold could cripple a foot, and a person who could not walk could not survive. So somewhere in that distant past, a human being did something clever. They wrapped their feet in whatever they had: animal hide, bark, woven grass, or fur bound with strips of leather. And with that simple act, they unlocked the ability to go places the naked foot could never endure. Scientists have even found clues to this hidden revolution written in human bones. By studying ancient skeletons, researchers noticed that at a certain point in prehistory, the small toe bones of some humans became noticeably weaker and thinner. The reason, they believe, is that once people began wearing supportive footwear, their toes no longer had to grip and brace against rough ground with every step. In other words, our own bodies carry the fossil evidence that shoes have been reshaping us for tens of thousands of years. The oldest surviving shoes are humble but remarkable. In a cave in North America, archaeologists discovered sandals woven from sagebrush bark that are around 9,000 to 10,000 years old, their soles still showing the shape of the feet that once wore them. And frozen in a glacier high in the Alps, the famous prehistoric traveler known as the Iceman was found wearing sophisticated shoes made of deer and bear hide, stuffed with grass for warmth, proof that even 5,000 years ago, people understood how to build footwear suited to snow and mountains. From the very beginning, shoes were tools of survival, allowing humans to conquer climates and terrains that would otherwise have stopped them cold. As the first great civilizations rose, shoes began to take on a new meaning. They were no longer just about survival, they became about status. In ancient Egypt, sandals were woven from papyrus and palm leaves, and who wore them said everything about a person's place in the world. Pharaohs and priests walked in fine sandals, while common laborers often went barefoot. Some Egyptian rulers even had images of their enemies painted onto the soles of their sandals, so that with every step they took, they were symbolically trampling their foes into the dust. A shoe was no longer just a shoe. It was a message. In ancient Greece and Rome, footwear became even more deeply tied to identity and power. Romans in particular used shoes to mark rank and role with great precision. The color and style of a person's footwear could instantly reveal whether they were a senator, a soldier, a citizen, or a slave. But perhaps the most important shoe in Roman history was the one worn by its soldiers. The Roman military marched across thousands of miles in tough, sturdy sandals with soles studded with iron hobnails, footwear built to survive endless roads and brutal campaigns. Those hobnailed shoes carried the legions across the known world and helped build one of the greatest empires in history. In a very real sense, Rome conquered on the strength of its footwear. Armies, then as now, could only go as far as their shoes could carry them. That truth would echo across every age of warfare that followed. Throughout history, the fate of armies has often rested on something as simple as whether their soldiers had decent boots. Troops with worn-out or missing footwear suffered frostbite, crippling blisters, and disease, and could be defeated by the terrain itself before they ever reached the enemy. Generals understood that a soldier who could not march was a soldier lost, and the supply of sturdy boots became a matter of life, death, and victory. Some of history's most brutal military disasters were made far worse by the failure of footwear. as exhausted soldiers were left to struggle through ice and mud with their feet falling apart. The humble boot, so easy to overlook, has quietly helped decide the outcome of wars and the rise and fall of nations. Throughout the centuries that followed, shoes remained one of the clearest symbols of wealth and social standing, and sometimes that symbolism reached absurd extremes. In medieval Europe, a bizarre fashion took hold among the nobility for shoes with impossibly long, pointed toes. These elongated shoes grew longer and longer until the tips had to be stuffed with material to hold their shape, and in some cases were so ridiculous that the wearer could barely walk. The length of the point became a way of showing off nobility and rank, and eventually laws were passed that actually restricted how long a person's shoe points could be, based on their social class. It is one of history's strangest truths that people once fought over the right to wear the most impractical shoes imaginable, purely to prove how important they were. And then there is one of the most surprising facts in the entire history of footwear. The high heel, an item now most associated with women's fashion, did not begin that way at all. High heels were originally worn by men. They are believed to have come from the cavalry riders of Persia, whose raised heels helped lock their feet into their stirrups while riding and shooting arrows. As this style spread into Europe, aristocratic men embraced the high heel as a symbol of power, status, and masculine strength. One famous king of France was renowned for his luxurious heeled shoes with bright red soles, a fashion reserved for the highest ranks of the court. For a long stretch of history, the taller the heel, the more powerful the man. Only later did high heels shift to become part of women's fashion, a complete reversal of what they once represented. There is another hidden detail in the history of shoes that most people never realize. For most of human history, shoes were not made with a distinct left and right foot. They were built as identical, straight shapes, and the wearers simply broke them in until they slowly molded to each foot over time. A shoe was a precious, expensive, handmade object. Skilled craftsmen labored over each pair by hand, stitching leather with painstaking care. Shoes were repaired again and again rather than thrown away, and for the poor, a single pair might have to last for years. Owning good footwear was a genuine luxury that many people simply could not afford. Shoes even wove themselves into human belief, ritual, and language in ways that survive to this day. For centuries, people across Europe hid old shoes inside the walls and chimneys of their homes, tucked away in the brickwork as good luck charms meant to protect the household from evil spirits. Countless of these concealed shoes have been discovered by builders renovating old houses, a quiet reminder of how much meaning people once poured into their footwear. In parts of Europe, poor workers wore simple shoes carved entirely from a single block of wood. According to a popular story, when these workers grew angry at the machines that were replacing them, they would throw their wooden shoes into the gears to jam and break them. And it is often said that this is where we get the word for deliberately wrecking something from within. Whether or not that origin is entirely true, it captures how deeply shoes were tied to the lives, struggles, and even the rebellions of ordinary people. All of that changed with the arrival of the industrial age. As machines transformed the world, they transformed the humble shoe as well. Inventions allowed the different parts of a shoe to be stitched and assembled far faster than any human hand could manage. One of the great breakthroughs came from an inventor who designed a machine capable of shaping and attaching the upper part of a shoe to its sole automatically, a task that had always required enormous skill and time. This single innovation dramatically sped up production and slashed the cost of shoes. For the first time in history, well-made footwear became something ordinary people could afford. Shoes transformed from a handcrafted luxury into a mass-produced product available to almost everyone. With mass production came an explosion of new kinds of shoes. Perhaps the most world-changing of all was born from a simple material: rubber. Once people learned how to treat rubber so that it became strong and durable instead of sticky and brittle, it opened the door to a whole new type of footwear: shoes with soft, flexible, silent rubber soles. Because they allowed people to move quietly, these shoes earned a nickname that suggested you could sneak up on someone while wearing them. The sneaker was born. At first, they were simple and practical, but over the following decades, the sneaker would rise to become one of the most powerful cultural objects on the planet. As sports grew into a global obsession in the 20th century, athletic shoes became big business. Companies competed fiercely to design footwear that could help athletes run faster, jump higher, and play harder. Star athletes lent their names to shoes, and suddenly a pair of sneakers was not just equipment, it was identity, aspiration, and cool, all laced together. In a strange echo of the pointed shoes of medieval nobles and the red heels of kings, sneakers became a new way to display status. Rare and limited edition designs began to sell out in minutes, and some pairs were resold for staggering sums of money. People once again lined up, competed, and paid fortunes, not for long pointed toes this time, but for the right shoes on their feet. Today, shoes are one of the largest industries in the entire world. Billions of pairs are produced every single year, in every imaginable style, for every possible purpose. There are shoes for running, climbing, dancing, working, and fighting. There are shoes designed by scientists to protect and enhance the human body, and shoes designed by artists to be admired like sculptures. And yet, for all this staggering variety, the fundamental idea remains exactly the same as it was for that ancient person in the Armenian cave: stuffing dried grass into a shaped piece of leather, a covering to protect the foot, and to carry us wherever we need to go. Somewhere right now, in a small workshop, a craftsman is stitching a pair of shoes by hand, exactly as cobblers have for thousands of years. Somewhere in an enormous factory, machines are producing thousands of identical pairs an hour, destined for feet all over the globe. Somewhere, a group of eager people is lining up outside a store, waiting for the release of a shoe so coveted it feels like treasure. And somewhere, a parent is gently sliding a tiny first pair of shoes onto the feet of a child about to take their very first steps, never thinking about the vast and astonishing history wrapped around those little feet. The history of survival, of empires, of kings and revolutions, all carried quietly beneath us, in the most overlooked object we own. If you enjoyed this story, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment telling me which everyday object with a hidden history you want to see next. And if this video taught you something new, smash that like button so more people can discover the strange and fascinating history of the things all around us.